when you're close to me. You love me right now.
I can remember going to sit down and do an interview with Vibe magazine. And I had the young lady who was interviewing me look at me. And she went in on me being older than him. But right after that, she let me know she was, kicking it with him too. After I began.
Just hours after D'Angelo's passing, Angie Stone's final interview shattered every illusion, confirming what fans had quietly feared for years. The very woman who once rescued D'Angelo's career had been slowly written out of his legacy.
Pride as a man would not allow him to do that because he doesn't want to share the.
Their son Michael didn't just inherit their musical genius, he also carried the heavy curse of pride, the same force that tore apart neo-soul's most powerful union.
The pride is still the gangster in this.
What Angie Stone shared in her final conversation peeled back the curtain on the real price of musical brilliance and the dark machinery that often feeds on it. So let's dive in. The untold story behind Brown Sugar. When D'Angelo first stepped into that New York studio in the early 90s, he wasn't the confident icon the world would one day idolize. Angie Stone remembered a very different man, soft-spoken, hidden beneath oversized clothes, weighed down by self-doubt and creative inconsistency that had already worn out his publisher's patience. The D'Angelo she met was overflowing with raw talent, but lacked direction. Melodies trapped inside his mind, never making it to the mic. His insecurity and physical state made him almost unrecognizable from the polished image that would later define neo-soul. Jocelyn Cooper and Gary Harris, his publishing team, were running out of options. Their golden prospect was stalling out. Brilliant, but stuck. They needed someone who could turn that raw energy into something the world could actually hear. That savior turned out to be Angie Stone, already a respected force in music. Known from her trailblazing work with the sequence and vertical hold, a woman famous for finishing what others couldn't.
The world didn't know him. He had weight on him at the time. A lot of people see him all cut up and it's just like, look at this fine, gorgeous man. No, he wasn't all of that. When I met him, he was overweight.
The bond between them formed instantly, though it wasn't born out of romance. Both carried the heartbeat of the South in their veins, speaking the same language of rhythm and soul that lived deeper than technique. Stone looked beyond D'Angelo's insecurities and saw the artist buried underneath, while he discovered in her someone capable of shaping his scattered brilliance into focus. Their connection felt almost spiritual, as if destiny itself had designed this meeting between two artists built to complete each other's strengths. The publishers knew exactly what they wanted when they brought the pair together. Angie was there to mold D'Angelo's craft and finally get him to finish the songs he kept locked inside his mind. What began as a simple working relationship quickly evolved into something more profound. Long nights in the studio revealed a chemistry that was both creative and emotional. Stone became the order to his chaos, the discipline to his free-flowing genius. While he offered the spark that would redefine the sound of modern R&B, the Brown Sugar sessions stretched over months, with Stone becoming both his anchor and emotional backbone. When the project seemed like it might never be completed, she made a choice that would haunt her forever. On Christmas Day, 1994, while the rest of the world gathered with family, Angie Stone was locked inside that studio. Pushing D'Angelo through the final tracks that would complete his debut, she gave up her holiday, her family, and her own work, just to make sure his dream reached the finish line. Her no-nonsense precision filled the gaps in his process. D'Angelo could hear entire songs in his head, but it was Stone who grounded them in reality, translating his ideas into finished masterpieces. She became his creative interpreter, shaping what existed only in emotion into music the world could feel. That album would catapult D'Angelo to stardom, but the woman who helped give it life would soon be erased from the story. The irony was cruel, setting the stage for what would follow. The same executives who'd praised her began whispering that D'Angelo couldn't complete anything without Angie in the studio. What they meant as admiration became fuel for his pride, and the first spark of resentment that would destroy them. As Brown Sugar turned into a classic, love began to slip quietly into the mix. Their professional connection was evolving into something deeper, something the industry was never ready to see. What grew naturally between them was soon weaponized against her. The age gap, once irrelevant, became a loaded headline, a sharp tool the industry used to discredit her, turning genuine love into scandal.
Into a source of constant controversy.
He pursued me. I did not pursue him. I thought he was older than what he was because he had an old.
What began as friendship quietly blossomed into love, but the timing couldn't have been worse. Just as their bond deepened into something real, D'Angelo's career began to skyrocket in ways neither of them were prepared for. Brown Sugar changed everything. Overnight, the world stopped seeing him as a struggling artist and started worshiping him as R&B's next great savior. And with that praise came the kind of attention that turns affection into ammunition. That the fame, the cameras, the corporate handlers, they didn't just reshape his image, they rewrote the rules of their relationship. Suddenly, The same industry that once celebrated Angie for saving his career began treating her like a liability. The warning signs appeared first in the press. During interviews, Stone noticed a strange new tone, subtle at first, then unmistakably cruel. Reporters who once praised her artistry now came armed with loaded questions and judgmental smirks. They weren't interested in her legacy, her pioneering work, or the years she spent shaping the sound of neo-soul. Instead, every headline revolved around her age, her relationship, and whether she was holding D'Angelo back. The pattern was too sharp, too consistent, to be random. This wasn't ordinary journalism, it was a campaign, a quiet but coordinated effort to erase her from the narrative and position D'Angelo as a lone prodigy. Behind the smiles and flashbulbs, the message was clear. Angie Stone had become inconvenient to the myth the industry wanted to sell. Stone would soon uncover the disturbing reality behind those vicious interviews. The attacks weren't random. Many of the same women criticizing her were secretly pursuing D'Angelo themselves. Female journalists, publicists, even label insiders, using their positions of power to undermine his real relationship, all while positioning themselves as the better fit. The now infant Vibe magazine interview became the breaking point, a journalist publicly admitting she was romantically involved with D'Angelo while simultaneously dragging Angie in print for the same thing. It wasn't journalism anymore, it was jealousy disguised as professionalism. That moment exposed something bigger than gossip. It revealed an ugly truth about how the music industry values black women, how their brilliance is celebrated only when it benefits someone else's narrative. Angie's genius was acknowledged when it made D'Angelo look polished, but erased the moment it threatened to make her look essential. Her age became the weapon. Her experience, once praised as guidance, was suddenly framed as control. Meanwhile, D'Angelo's growing fame was painted as pure, untouched genius, detached from the woman who had helped shape his sound, his confidence, and even his direction. But while the industry twisted the story, D'Angelo himself was changing too. The quiet, unsure artist Angie first met was fading. In his place emerged a man acutely aware of his beauty, his body, and the power that came with both. The transformation that would later explode in the Kinesi Stuff Untitled How Does It Feel video had already begun physically, mentally, spiritually, and with each photo shoot, each headline, each whispered temptation, he began to drift further from the woman who built the foundation he now stood on.
I can remember going to sit down and do an interview with Vibe magazine, and I had the young lady who was interviewing me look at me, and she went in on me being older than him. But right after that, she let me know she was, kicking it with him too.
Angie found herself trapped in a storm she couldn't control, attacked from every angle by forces larger than her. The industry wanted to shrink her role in D'Angelo's rise, turning her from architect to afterthought. Female rivals within the business used their positions to undercut her privately while chasing the same man she had built up publicly. And worst of all, D'Angelo himself started believing the whispers. He began to wonder if being with Angie made him look dependent. Instead of gifted, that thought would become the poison that slowly ate away at everything they had built. What came next wasn't coincidence, it was calculated. The music industry's quiet machine went to work, rewriting history in real time. The same executives who had once praised Angie for saving D'Angelo's career now pushed a new narrative. D'Angelo, the lone genius who changed neo-soul forever. Angie had seen politics before, but nothing this deliberate. She was witnessing an erasure in motion. As D'Angelo's image evolved from shy creative to global sex symbol, the transformation was more than physical. The world saw the sculpted body from the Untitled video, but Angie saw something deeper. The insecurity that once grounded him had turned into ego, pride, and detachment. The same man who used to seek her guidance now sought validation from everyone else. The humility that birthed Brown Sugar was gone, replaced by a hunger to protect the illusion the industry built around him, and somewhere between the spotlight and the silence, Angie realized she was no longer his muse, she was his reminder. A reminder of the man he used to be, and the woman the world was trying to erase.
Old when I was trying to help him get through the studio work. I wasn't old when I was trying to get them albums finished. I wasn't old when I was writing them hits with them.
Stone began to notice the quiet shift long before the world did. The marketing teams were rewriting D'Angelo's image, piece by piece, turning him from a soulful musician into a myth. And in that myth, there was no space for her. The new version of D'Angelo had to be single, mysterious, and untouchable. A fantasy, not a man grounded by love or history. His connection to an older woman who had seen his insecurities up close didn't fit the story they were selling. For the industry, it was simple math. Romance didn't sell records, mystique did. And Angie, she was suddenly the equation's problem. Invitations to studio sessions stopped coming. Meetings that once had her input were now closed creative discussions. The same people who once begged for her guidance were now calling her a distraction. It was a surgical removal, clean, deliberate, and cold. D'Angelo once dependent on her instincts, was now surrounded by handlers and executives who only cared about preserving his new image, not the truth behind it. Angie watched from the sidelines as the man she helped build was packaged, polished, and sold to the world. His story stripped of the woman who made it possible. Behind closed doors, industry executives started saying the quiet part out loud. D'Angelo needed distance, not from controversy, but from his own beginnings. Angie Stone, once his mentor and creative backbone, suddenly became bad optics. Her age, her prior fame, her deep understanding of his process, all of it clashed with the image of a young, untamed genius they were desperate to sell. The woman who helped shape his sound was now being erased to protect his brand. For Angie, the fallout was brutal. She hadn't just poured her heart into D'Angelo. She'd invested her career, her time, and her spirit. She had paused her own momentum so he could rise. Watching him pull away wasn't just painful. It was betrayal, dressed as evolution, and the punishment didn't stop there. The same executives who once called her indispensable stopped returning her calls. Studio doors quietly closed. Invitations vanished. Her name, once respected across the R&B landscape, became whispered with caution. The industry had made its position clear. Anyone tied to D'Angelo's past was now a liability. Angie Stone wasn't just being forgotten, she was being deleted.
That decided to become a symbol, or the industry cultivated a symbol.
D'Angelo, meanwhile, was cracking under pressures he'd never been prepared for. The quiet, introspective man Angie once knew was now being molded into a symbol of raw confidence and sensual perfection, a role that clashed violently with who he really was. The industry wanted a fantasy, not a human being, and that conflict was eating him alive. After Brown Sugar's success, D'Angelo found himself torn between gratitude for Angie's guidance and resentment toward how the world perceived it. The same woman who had built him up was now being painted as the one who held him back. Their age difference, once irrelevant in private, became tabloid ammunition. Journalists twisted their story into something predatory, as if Angie's maturity made their love less real. The press refused to see partnership. They wanted a scandal. Soon, a new narrative began to take shape, that D'Angelo hadn't risen with Angie, but in spite of her, that the muse had somehow become the manipulator. Then came the storm that shattered everything, the credit war. When Brown Sugar was finally hailed as a masterpiece, insiders couldn't help but acknowledge Angie's hand in making it possible. Everyone who had witnessed the sessions knew she was the one who brought structure to chaos, who pushed D'Angelo from potential to performance. But what should have been celebration turned to poison. Every compliment sent D'Angelo further into self-doubt and wounded pride. Instead of unity, success became a wedge, one that the industry was all too happy to drive deeper. The partnership that had birthed a movement was now collapsing under the weight of ego, envy, and exploitation.
The pride is still the gangster in this.
The recognition meant to celebrate Angie Stone's genius soon turned toxic in D'Angelo's world. What the industry saw as praise, he heard as insult. Each time someone credited her discipline and direction, it sounded to him like an accusation, proof that he couldn't stand on his own. Every acknowledgement of her hand in Brown Sugar felt like a shadow cast over his creative identity. What began as admiration for her skill slowly twisted into humiliation for him. The same executives who had hired Angie out of respect for her experience now couldn't stop talking about how she brought out his best. They didn't realize that each compliment chipped away at the very pride that fueled his art. Angie hadn't asked for the spotlight. She never sought credit or tried to claim ownership of his vision, but she couldn't erase what everyone in the studio had seen, that without her guidance, the album might never have been finished. To the outside world, that was teamwork. To D'Angelo, it was exposure, what others meant as acknowledgement. He took his doubt a whisper that maybe his brilliance depended on someone else. And in an industry built on image and ego, that whisper became unbearable. Almost overnight, gratitude turned to distance. The man who once saw Angie as his anchor now viewed her as a reminder of his own insecurities. The warmth that fueled their creativity gave way to cold pride and quiet resentment. The love born in the studio, pure, passionate, and real, was being slowly poisoned by perception, politics, and wounded ego.
People zoom in on you to bring about their pain. They don't care how they hurt you.
The industry quickly sensed the growing fracture and moved in to exploit it. Behind closed doors, executives whispered that D'Angelo would shine brighter alone. A solo figure was easier to market, easier to control, and far more profitable than a partnership that required acknowledging. Angie Stone's influence? They played to his deepest insecurities, feeding the idea that her presence made him look dependent. Bit by bit, they encouraged distance, convincing him that to protect his image, he needed to separate from the very woman who had helped build it. The cruelest twist was how the very qualities that once saved his career became the weapon used to destroy their bond. Angie's discipline, her work ethic, her professionalism, the same traits that had completed Brown Sugar, were now being twisted into proof that she had overshadowed him. In boardrooms and back channels, her name became a quiet threat. Her competence challenged the myth of the self-made prodigy. They were selling to the world. Angie watched the love unravel in real time. What had once been effortless chemistry turned into constant tension, conversations laced with unspoken resentment, affection replaced by pride. The studio that had birthed their greatest creation now echoed with silence and suspicion. And just when a child should have healed everything, the wounds only deepened. The birth of their son, Michael D'Angelo, Archer 2, should have been a new chapter, a bridge between love and legacy. Instead, it became another battleground. Pride and industry politics poisoned even parenthood. D'Angelo, desperate to prove he needed no one, not in music, not in life, began resisting every form of collaboration, even as a father. Angie's insights into their son's musical gifts were brushed aside, her experience dismissed as interference. The man who had once leaned on her for creative direction now recoiled from any suggestion of her guidance. The divide that began in the studio had followed them home, turning what could have been shared legacy into parallel loneliness.
That hired me to work with you, all those people were running their mouths and saying stuff like, "He not gonna get nothing done unless Angie in the studio." So enough people said enough of that the industry started to look at, oh, she's...
Angie Stone understood the cruel psychology unfolding within her own family. The industry kept circling back to the same question: when would she and D'Angelo reunite creatively? Executives remembered the undeniable chemistry that birthed Brown Sugar and wanted to bottle that lightning again. But what they didn't understand, or maybe what they did, was that pride had become the unspoken wall between them. D'Angelo couldn't risk sharing credit again. The thought of another hit being tied to Angie's influence wounded the image he'd spent years protecting. So instead of embracing collaboration, he avoided it, even when it meant losing potential opportunities and damaging his own family. The result was quiet warfare, psychological exhaustion that bled into every part of their lives. And caught in the crossfire was their son, Michael, a child blessed with both parents' musical brilliance, yet burdened by the tension their love had left behind. Every time talk of a reunion surfaced, it wasn't about art anymore, it was about ownership. Who would get credit if the magic happened again? Who would the headlines celebrate? To D'Angelo, working with Angie again felt like surrendering ground he couldn't afford to lose. To her, his refusal was heartbreaking, a man protecting an image at the cost of the legacy they could have built together, and through it all, their son grew up watching two extraordinary artists trapped by pride, love, and an industry that had mastered the art of turning unity into competition. Michael inherited their rhythm, their soul, and their scars. D'Angelo's distance wasn't just from Angie anymore. It extended to their child's potential, as if acknowledging the mother's influence would somehow weaken the father's name.
Began to get the accolades. It turned into a love-hate relationship.
For Angie Stone, the pattern was painfully familiar. Another genius, undone by his own reflection. D'Angelo couldn't separate the artist from the man, or the father from the performer. The same pride that kept him from creating with Stone was now keeping him from co-parenting with her. Acknowledging her influence, even in their son's growth, felt to him like confirming the industry's cruel whisper that he needed her. Angie found herself trapped in a no-win situation. She wanted the best for both D'Angelo and their child, yet every act of support was treated as interference. Her efforts to nurture Michael's musical gifts were seen not as maternal love, but as intrusion, as if her presence might somehow dilute his father's legacy or stain the purity of his inheritance. What had started as a professional divide had now carved a canyon through their family. Angie could still see D'Angelo's brilliance, the rare fire that once drew her to him, but it was now surrounded by walls of ego and fear. He had become a man so determined to stand alone that even unity felt like defeat. To the outside world, industry insiders still mourned their separation, understanding that some combinations like Stone and D'Angelo can't be duplicated or replaced. But for D'Angelo, proving his independence mattered more than any record, reunion, or relationship. Pride had become his religion, and its cost was everything he'd once called home.
Pride as a man would not allow him to do that because he doesn't want to share the...
Stone began to see the full pattern, a tragic loop of self-sabotage that stretched far beyond their love story. The same pride that had destroyed their partnership was now isolating D'Angelo from everyone around him, collaborators, producers, even lifelong friends. One by one, the bridges that once carried his genius to the world were burned in silence. He wasn't just retreating from Angie, he was retreating from everything. Then came the final truth before tragedy. Angie Stone's last major interview before the car accident that claimed her life in March 2025. For the first time in decades, she broke her silence, and the truth she revealed was devastating. Behind the myth of D'Angelo's rise was a story of betrayal, manipulation, and deliberate erasure. Stone's fingerprints were all over the music that made him a legend, but the credits told a different story. Songs she had co-written, vocals she had recorded, even entire performances she had shaped were scrubbed from history. She revealed that her voice, unmistakably hers, appeared on tracks that were later credited to others, including the haunting duet Paradise. long believed to feature Mary J. Blige and D'Angelo. Even in death, the erasure continued. When news broke of D'Angelo's passing in October 2025, the headlines called her only the mother of his child, not the woman who saved his first album, not the creative partner who built his sound, just a footnote in the life she helped define. In that final interview, Angie spoke softly, a woman at peace, but still carrying the weight of what might have been. She praised D'Angelo's brilliance, mourned his loneliness, and admitted that his pride had cost them both everything. "We could have built an empire," she said, "but pride don't build. It destroys." And with that, Angie Stone's voice, the same voice that helped birth neo-soul, faded into history. The woman who once saved D'Angelo's career had been erased from his story, but never from the truth.
He's a rebel like we are. He wanted to do his thing, devoid of mom and dad. And guess what? I have to stand back and stand out of the way because I trust.
The industry's treatment of their love story didn't end with them. It rippled through generations. Angie Stone's career was never the same after What began as a partnership built on love and creativity was rewritten by executives who saw her brilliance as a threat to his image. Both artists paid the price for that manipulation, but Angie's cost was invisible, hidden behind headlines that only told half the truth. In the end, her decision to speak after decades of silence was more than an interview. It was vindication. It was closure. It was a woman reclaiming her name in a story she helped create but was written out of. She had helped shape neo-soul's defining sound, guided one of its brightest stars, and paid for it with her career, her peace, and her legacy. But in that final interview, Angie Stone gave something priceless: the truth. The timing was haunting. Her words came just before both their deaths, like a message left behind for their son, and for history itself, because the pride that destroyed their love could never destroy what they created together. For a brief, golden moment, love and music were enough. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Thanks for watching. Rest in peace to Angie Stone and D'Angelo, two souls who changed the sound of a generation, even if the world forgot how much they needed each other to do it.